Okay, welcome. Hey, hi. Well, you know what I'm going to say. Turn off your cell phones. Really, nothing new there. Okay, Wisdom Wednesday, tomorrow right here on the stage. We will have Kara Newby and I thought it was two people, but anyway. We'll present international and domestic hunger. So that should be an interesting performance tomorrow. Of course, the fall evaluations are due. I've already done mine, so hopefully you've all done yours. But if not, please get those completed. We are all anxiously waiting to hear what you think of our classes. The holiday social is December 6th, of course, and we're going to accept reservations, limited to 100 guests. And this year I promise that when we sing Christmas carols, I will sing softly for a change. And, of course, Ollie will be closed November 19th to 23rd for the Thanksgiving holiday. And winter catalogs will be available January 10th. Of course, registration January 14th to the 24th. And winter classes will begin on January 28th. Well, last week we talked about how the early church would kind of ease people into becoming Christians. They wouldn't, they'd kind of take it kind of slow. And what would happen is, for example, they would take over a temple, provided, of course, it was in good condition. If it wasn't a good condition temple, we didn't really want it, but they would take over a temple, and then the local people would feel comfortable with going to the temple because they had already used it for a place of worship. So that was one thing. But when you take over a temple like that, you can no longer do sacrifices in that temple. So what they would do is, for example, they would take an ox, and instead of slaughtering it in the temple and presenting it to the gods, they would slaughter it outside and then feed it to the congregation. So the congregation would have, a nice meal before services. So you may think that perhaps the early church invented the tailgate. So, well, one thing I know that our great professor here, even though he didn't invent the history lecture, he didn't invent it, but his lectures are so exciting and so stimulating, they will make your entrails quiver. I give you the one and only Dr. Joseph Kicklighter.
Oh, boy. Yeah. You just never know where he's going. That's, and you're married, I know. So, if she doesn't know, you can't blame the rest of us. Folks, we are unbelievably about to come to an end. Next time is our last lecture for the fall, except for finals. So don't forget finals. But seriously, it's hard to believe because I got the schedule and we don't gear back up until, late January? Yeah, so we'll be apart quite a bit of time, but I hope to leave you today and next week with enough to think about while we are apart that you could be only titillated and agog when you're thinking about 2019 and thinking about all of the dates and chronology that you have in store. Because we're going to get only as far as what you see up here, Charlemagne. And that's a really appropriate place to end this segment because, frankly, this is the early medieval period. And with him, it culminates. Because after him, we have some problems. And those will be matters of further discussion. But Charlemagne is sort of the epitome of German, Roman, and Christian brought together. And so it seems appropriate to stop there. But today is a preface about how all the elements come together. And there's quite a list of characters and groups involved. You'll notice that I mentioned the papacy and the Byzantines, who have major roles to play. And let me again remind you that as we begin today, that whether or not that historian of Belgium that I spoke of earlier, Henri Perrin, whether or not he was right, we're certainly aware that, however grudgingly at that time, the Pope and the Byzantine Emperor accepted each other. And we are going to see in this period that will finally come to an end. And playing in on this, the Franks, the first who went Catholic, lest we forget, and of course, those other people down south, Lombards. You know what a Lombard mother would say to the Lombard child who said something about, "Mommy, Mommy, one of my friends mentioned the Trinity." Well, you just wash your mouth out. Don't you talk like that. But guess what? We're about to get converted. Lombards are coming across. It took a darn long time. And I don't think this was as a result of a mass meeting, but it happened. And we are going to see how that plays into our story. Franks, Lombards, Byzantines, and last but by no means least, he who sits on the throne of Peter, a.k.a. the Pope. Okay. So with that as an introduction, the Merovingians, they are the family of Clovis. They claimed descent from a god, which is nice. After they got Catholic, I think they played that down a little bit, but they said he was just a really great guy and he had important divine contacts. I don't know how they would spin that, after Catholicism, but some way they would claim that the throne belonged to them. Well, you're descended from Clovis, and you could play off that a long time. Great-granddad was Clovis, and people, ooh. Well, that's nice, but how long is that going to last? It'll last a while. There's Dagobert in the 7th century. You say, but I thought he was the Frankish king. Well, that's part of our problem. People sometimes, this is DNA, this is a genetic issue, they just have too many boys. Now, you say, well, that's great. Not really, because each son demands, expects his cut of the realm. You can't say, well, you're the oldest, I just want to serve you. No. And it was Frankish custom that they split it up. So this particular individual happens to be the king of Austrasia. Now, a part of Franklin, and we're going to see the map. Yeah. There's a Neustria, Austrasia, these places there, and you say, well, then they can have ecumenical councils or reunions. Not so much. Then they want to fight for the other persons. People are bad. I'm telling you. There's some evil there. And you say, well, if they're hurting each other, Maybe they're casualties. You betcha. And what do you think each fella will do? Have more fellas. And the result, lots of killings. And lots more splitting up of lands. So that's the problem of the Merovingians. The papacy needs friends, as we're going to see. The papacy needs friends because despite the splendid reign of Pope Gregory I, remember him? 590 to 604. Yeah, you've treasured that. Napoleon said knowledge is like a chest of drawers. We just pull out the drawer and it's there waiting for us. So that's what you've done. Thank you so much. But remember that 590 to 604 and understand that he'd had problems. Remember, he was papal ambassador to Constantinople and he hadn't even had Greek 101. I mean, you mean he suffered from Grecophobia? Well, resentment. And it doesn't get better, this kind of attitude about the Greeks. And he has reason, because the Lombards are in Italy. Help. The Byzantines say sorry. But there's something even more serious. Now, there's the map. See Austrasia in purple? Lilac, really. Oh, I'm sorry. It's way up here. And see the different pieces? You get this and you get that. And then you think, but what if one of them gets super fertile and has lots more boys? Oh, no. Yes, you got it right. Starting fighting and taking more. I mean, there's really no end to all of this. You get that idea that it's really very troubling when you think about it on that level. You think, gee, shouldn't somebody have changed that Frankish custom? I think so. Primogeniture would have helped them a great deal, but I don't think they are exactly ready to talk about that at this point. They are simply fighting wars, basically not very involved in trying to bring all this territory together. And now, le roi fainéant. I think I'm right. I've got two French experts on the front row, so I say it nervously. But it means the do-nothing kings. I thought it would be neat just call them the slothful kings, the idle kings. And you think, what are they? Well, people who study this use the term to refer to the Merovingians who had just sort of worn out. You know, they weren't saying, do you want to go have a war? Or do you want to go attack somebody? Or would you like to, there's a delegation of Benedictines, monks who want to talk to you about special projects for the church. No, I just want to chill. I'm kind of beat. And you think, nay, you're the king. You're God's anointed. We don't have breaks. We don't do that. But they were, I hate to say it, losers with a capital L. They just assumed that someone else could do the heavy lifting. And that's essentially what would happen. So that's a good term for them, le roi fainéant. And this is going to allow our future Carolingians to take over. Oh, it starts off innocently enough. It's as if maybe one Monday night, I call Frank and I say, Frank, you know, I just want to take it easy Tuesday. So I'm doing a lecture on the papacy. So could you do it yourself? And he says, like the nice person, he says, I'll be glad to. And I trust him. And that's the last thing I'll ever find out. I mean, he will, of course, become the master, the expert. And then he'll say, I don't think you'll be needed anymore. You can just stay in the palace. If that happened, which it won't. But if it did, I'm saying that, in fact, these future Carolingians are going simply to be the chief administrators. Charles Martel, or I could say Charles the Martel, Charles the Hammer, which does not bode well for those who are pacifists or who want to remain in prayer. Charles Martel was tough, and basically, before they know it, these rulers are losing all kinds of authority in the name of someone says, I want to take over that. I know you're tired. It's hard being king. And we think so much of you. You rest. I'll do it for you. You trust them. But that's our Charles Martel. And Charles Martel, but he's the one who's going to get, as he spin it, and the media, they're not going to mention the Merovingian. He's nothing. But it's Martel, great leader. Now, he's not a king. He's just leader. But he's going to get all the headlines. And if I were a Merovingian, I'd be worried. But not him. He's chilling. That's the problem with the chillers. Things can happen to them, lose their power. Now, back in Italy, well, let's go south. Like those colors, purple and green. And you say, gosh, is there room enough for all of us? I'm not so sure. Let's look at that. Look at, first of all, those Lombards. Remember the Lombards? In case you don't, let's take it back to the reign of Justinian. Yes, 527 to 565, as you so well know. And during that time, remember, all of those territories became Byzantine controlled. Their capital up in Ravenna. And during that time, the Ostrogoths were overcome, merely to be replaced by another Germanic group, the Lombards. It's sort of like the Byzantines defeated one, but by doing so, they allowed another to come in. I mean, they didn't mean to, just exchanging one gang of Aryans for another. But you don't talk about Trinity in front of either group, okay? So, but they ruled over quite a bit of it. Look at all that green territory. You say, but were there warm relations between Lombards and Byzantines? No, hurtful relations. Icy relations, I would even say. Because I would not be a bit surprised if the Lombards did not make efforts to take that Byzantine territory. Remember, the Byzantine emperor doesn't live there. It's his deputy. And they're probably speaking and writing a lot of Greek, right? Greek here. And this is an outpost, you might say, of Byzantine civilization. You say, well, what's going on in Constantinople? Are things great there? No, they're not great. We have troubles. You say Muslims? No, not yet. That's later. The problems we've got Persian problems. We have other issues. I mean, and I mean We have the Byzantine debt. Justinian and Theodora had expensive tastes. Saks, Tiffany's, I'm telling you. So the Byzantines, in addition to having foreign enemies, had internal issues, and all of this meant they didn't have a lot of resources that they could dedicate to dealing with the Italians, Lombards. And I'm going to tell you, the Pope didn't like it. He didn't like it one bit because, of course, he's Peter. He's number one, numero uno. And what does the emperor say? Well, you are mighty nice, but I'm pretty high too. So they can have their little debate along with the head of the church in Constantinople. He gets in on it. But how does any of this solve the problem? Well, it doesn't. It's a very, very bad problem. And the Pope must have been thinking to himself, I know Pope and Emperor, but maybe there's a different way. Maybe there's another way that I can find satisfaction. And I don't have to put up with that blankety-blank Greek. Although many of the popes were Greeks themselves, believe it or not. It's kind of interesting. I mean, they had taken Latin, don't worry about that. But it's still true to say that relations were very bad between the Pope and the Byzantines, and the Lombards were, I think the expression is, too close for comfort. You know, even after they convert to Catholicism, which I've thought a lot about, you have this whole nation of Lombards, and they suddenly go from Arian to Catholic. You think about some serious revisionism, new confirmation classes, and say, what's that Father, Son, and Holy Ghost you all are talking about? I don't get that. Yeah. Well, it's part of our new message. We're going Trinity. You know, it's that kind of, I mean, I'm serious. You had the first Lombard church, and you just don't do Trinity. And maybe they heard about it from school friends. I don't know. But it's a whole new way of going, and it will be an interesting change. And bishops, you don't think they're going to give up their jobs, health insurance and all that? You know, to say, oh, if I can't be an Arian, I don't even want to be a bishop. I don't think so. You got dental bills. What it will amount to is that they will become Catholic, and you say, then there's going to be a big hug. Lombard and his new Catholic brethren. I don't know. There's a lot of what we would call Arian desire to make the Pope their own kind of chaplain. You know, sort of like, now we're Catholic, and we're such good neighbors, and we want to get closer to you. And maybe for the purposes of the Pope, he doesn't want to be any closer to them. He likes a little breathing room. You know, sometimes, what is it they say? I want to be in my space. You're getting in my space. Well, I think the Pope would have said that. Okay, you're Catholic. Good for you. Okay? We're real glad. Yay, Peter. But get out of my territory. And what about those Greeks? Why don't they come do something? Well, we sent a letter, we asked, but we haven't gotten any response. And I mean, you see the land then, the Exarchate of Ravenna, the Exarch being the imperial administrator, and he's probably hemming and hawing. You know how people can be. Say, well, it's got to go through channels and all of that poppycock. And meanwhile, the Lombards, you know, they are super Catholic. You know how they get very excited. Say, we just loved our Pope, and they're writing that heart, Peter, and, you know, all of this stuff. And you're thinking, But they're still taking over our territory. They're not, we just don't feel comfortable. We feel insecure territorially. And the Pope is looking at the emperor and saying, and you Greeks are worthless. You're supposed to protect us, and you're not. So that's our situation. What are we going to do? You have to ask yourself, could there be someone who could help? Is there somewhere someone strong and tough, someone who loves the Pope and wants to help him? We'll see. All of this will come to a head with the question of the icons. Those of you who are either Catholic or Orthodox need no introduction to icons. Iconography has been a major part of Christianity from early centuries. The use of artistry to portray, there you see the crucifixion, mother and child, the manger scene, and various other aspects would be a major principle of preoccupation for monasteries and other groups in terms of artistry. And so the portrayal of events in the life of Christ and his mother and other events significant to Christianity became highly important through the centuries. The icons, I don't care whether you today are Catholic or Orthodox, as far as I am aware, they are still very, very important in those faiths. Some of us will remember 17th century Calvinism. Because if you are not a supporter of icons, you're really not a supporter of icons. You're not going to say, icons, I can take them or leave them. Hey, no, no, no. I think icons get people excited. Yeah, stimulating. They can be destroyed if people get extra excited. But we're not talking about the 17th century. We are talking about a much, much earlier time. A time when presumably, whether you're in the East or the West, icons are highly significant. Now let me explain that the church, as far as I'm aware, never taught that the icons were in and of themselves objects of sanctity. They were merely representations of sanctity. And that was fine, and particularly so in a society that was overwhelmingly illiterate. I don't want to frighten anyone in the room, but if you know any young people and you watch them with those devices of theirs, we may be coming to another stage like this, that they too will be an icon. They can't, it's mesmerizing. They have to have it. Yeah, it's so sad. And you say, maybe you could read a book. They look at me like I said a bad word. What did you say to me? So you understand then that icons were a very, very important aspect of worship, because we can read, whether it be scripture, whether it be the lives of the saints, whatever it was. But not everyone, in fact, very few people in that society had that privilege. So following it on their icons, or today's people, following it on their screens, I guess, were supposed to have their faith enhanced. You say, could there be a problem? Yes, there could be a problem. When one confuses the reality with the icon, I think you are seriously going to have issues. There is no doubt that by the 7th, 8th centuries, the production of icons by monasteries, monastic artists, shall we call them, the collections they would have, and perhaps saying, look at this icon. I bet you don't have one like this in your collection. You know, it's like any kind of set, you know. We have the finest collection, and you don't have that particular item. So, and think about the monasteries as they're growing out. It's a major production. So enough is noted about that to say that it shouldn't have been an issue at all. I mean, these groups are, and I imagine the monks and nuns, I mean, it was considered a wonderful group activity. The production of, you know, we're going to have icon making class this afternoon. And people would say, wow, anything to get out of working in the field, you know, that kind of thing. This will be great. I'll take a artsy craftsy course like that. Yeah. Sign me up. I'm right there in icon production class. Yeah. But that is part of it, and it is a very important part. And I think they were really, really developing. And then things happen. A new emperor in the 8th century. He's called Leo the Isaurian, and that part of what is now Turkey, and this has been, you can imagine, a hot debate topic at the Byzantine Historical Society. They have these groups. You know, one has one too many at happy hour. And they can get pretty vicious in these discussions of icons. Why would an Isaurian be, shocking, anti-icon? Instead of, don't like icons, yeah, with a slash. Isauria, some would say, by that period had Muslim influence. I don't know whether I buy this or not. As many of you know, Muslims do not believe in these kinds of pictorial representations of holiness. If Muslims by this time period, or Jews, had somehow influenced Leo's family, and like most emperors, you can imagine how Leo became emperor. He was just big general, took power. None of these people had long-lasting dynasties. Most of them come to power through their military successes. So Leo, so it is said, found, perhaps for theological reasons, that icons had to go. But it's also said, and again, I'm not so sure I think this, but it's said that he thought that the monasteries had too much political power, so somehow if he cut out icons, that they would be more respectful of him. Again, maybe, maybe not. But whatever it was, we call these people iconoclasts, from which we get the word for being iconoclastic, meaning that you're against what is often accepted, and iconodules, meaning those who are pro-icon. And you say, well, maybe take it or leave it. It's fine either way. No, it's not. It can't be that way. This is religion. Remember, there's a good reason they tell you don't discuss religion in politics in society, because folks get all, as my students would say, bent out of shape. So the fact is that Leo III had really started a major conflict, and it was only trouble for himself. Because you mess with those monasteries, he's sending in soldiers. You know, it's like in the movies when they're beating on the door and scaring you, and they go, "Read, get down, everybody get down." And these poor little monks having to get down. And what are they doing? They're attacking the icons. This has got to go. We're going to take it. And they're going, "Lord, you're going to hell. Damn you." I mean, and people get really excited about this. Don't mess with my icon collection. All of this then is going to create terrible problems for him. Can you imagine if you were Patriarch of Constantinople and your emperor is sending a raiding party on your icon collection? How would you feel? I mean, because he is emperor. He is God's number 2 man. I love my emperor. But now my emperor's attacking my icons. I'm torn. You're going to be torn if you don't shut up and do what you're told. So it's a big problem. But it's nothing like it will be in the West. Because in the West, icons rule. We love our icons. And that, you know what Greek is saying? We can't have icons. He wants to hurt our icons. Heck no. We are not tolerating any interference in the icons. He can talk big because Constantinople is a fairly long way away. Istanbul to Rome would be a nice trip, unless you have an airplane, which they didn't. So it was a long way, so you can go, you don't touch my icons, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, the Byzantines simply would have a hard time. I mean, if I were up there around Ravenna, you know what I would do with my icons? Put them up. And maybe at night, you know, whenever I gone to bed, I might pull them out, look at them, and enjoy them. Next morning, put them back up. Because, I mean, that's in that northeastern Italian area, that's about the extent of the area that the Byzantines controlled. And if you know what I think, some of those Byzantines might have been saying, "Well, I know he said we were supposed to destroy them, but you know what, man? I really love them." Yeah. Treachery. You know what kind of evaluation can you give? I mean, it's like, it's a problem. Perfidious. How many words can I think of to refer to? Because, I mean, you know, he had really started something, Leo III. And again, I don't know who could figure out what was in his mind, if it's religious or more likely political. Did he have some hope that he could work out some sort of deal with Muslim leaders in the future? Whatever it was, it certainly turned out very badly for the Byzantines in terms of their relationships with the West. Now, we do know that the iconoclastic movement is not going to last. It's a one-man show. And once Leo III is no longer emperor, you know what the new emperor is going to say in the inaugural address? Let there be icons. You know, bring out the easels. Bring out the paint. Give me those icons. Go Big Eye. Yeah, it's all about having icons. I mean, this is like amazing that one ruler could have this much influence in a bad way. If you think about East and West having great significance here, and I do, because we are on those ending parts of a relationship between the East and the West. Remember, Islam is right on the cusp of severing territorially the relationship between East and West, and this is just sort of exacerbating it. Now, I note that people are excommunicated and anathematized. And let me say, you don't want to be anathematized. That's just awful. You won't feel it right off. But, I mean, when they lay that big curse on you, I think you're just going to feel sad. I don't know. But, yes, we're getting into a time that I guess church leaders were beginning to use more and more their authority as state leaders, and as such could not merely excommunicate individuals for their personal doings, but anathematize whole groups of people. And that means, in some cases, putting the solemn high curse on you. And that's not good at all. A ceremony in which a candle representing you is blown out. Yeah. It's real depressing. You do not want an anathema. So someone offers you one, say, oh, thanks, but no thanks. Yeah, say, I don't need any today. That is the kind of thing, though. That's how serious people got about icons. And it's lucky that before long, with the passing of Leo III, the Isaurian, it'll be over. It's just non-issue. It's kind of funny that way. Now they'll have no effect on the Muslim community as they grow. I mean, their view of icons or any kinds of representations remain today. The use of icons in the Catholic and Orthodox churches also remain today. So this is just a small snag in the development of Christian belief, but a very important one given how it's going to change things. And that, of course, takes us to what will become England. You say, wow, we are really getting around. Yes, we are. The last time we talked about Britain, we were in a heathen land, weren't we? Very heathen. And I want you to know that thanks to the work of those wonderful people we call Benedictines, the church had moved, the Catholic Church that is, had moved into England. Because there were Christians already there who are called Celtic Christians. That's nice. But that's not our concern here. Our concern here is going to be the Catholic Church. Would that I could give 2 hours on the Catholic Church in England, but I am going to restrain myself and note simply that it was in the process of developing long before there was even an English king, as in good King Alfred. And out of this will come a man. Sound like I'm going to run him for office. Will come a man who will become a major figure not in England but on the continent of Europe. He has the very English-sounding name of Winfrith, Benedictine monk, and dedicated, as many monks were, to converting others to the faith. Because now you think, I thought you said the monks were supposed to stay there and work and go to painting class and do all those things. Yes, they are, but if you got that traveling fever and you want to help, because Granddaddy was heathen, remember? These newbies, you know, they haven't been in the faith that long. It's not like, you know, Grandma always just told me to love the Lord. No, Grandma didn't know about the Lord. She knew about quivering entrails. So, I mean, we haven't had this kind of faith very long, so they are very, very heated up for the faith. And so Winfrith, with other monks from England, will end up crossing over into what is today the Low Countries. The Frisians were hardcore. You got an entrail? I think it's quivering. These people, you say, but they're right next door to the Franks. The Franks aren't worried about the Frisians. Let them all go to hell for all we care. So, I mean, here you have poor little Winfrith and all these other Benedictines. They're leaving the comfort of their monastic home, which is up in the north of England. You know where Northumbria is, Cumbria and up there? They're from up there. Well, I don't know if I'd want to stay there either. Because that's right cold. That can get unpleasant. But anyway, they head to the Frisian area to talk to them about changing their ways. Let's put it that way. Winfrith is a very charismatic person. He will live to the incredible age of 80, which is amazing when you think about it. And he will have a very significant and important life in changing much of what was going on. I'm giving him a lot of credit because I really think he deserves it. He's a saint, he's a martyr, he even becomes an octogenarian, and he has friends in high places, I'll put it that way. He's friends with kings and popes, but at the same time, he himself is venerated as a saint. Now, sometimes when folks mess with your religion, there can be unpleasantness. You know, there was a book that came out, I think when I was a boy, called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Remember that book that Dr. Norman? I don't think it was intended to win friends and influence people by chopping down their trees. We love trees. Arbor Day. Is there anything like it? So beautiful, the branches. And you say, what is wrong with him? Is he anti-tree? Well, not exactly, if trees are used for the proper purpose. If you want to do a dance around a tree, if you want to climb to the tree, you want to watch the little birdies in the tree, those are good tree uses. But if I catch you praying to that tree, you're going down. And so is the tree. That's what our Winfrith was doing. Now you say, were there pro-tree people? You bet there were. You know, we're all kind of pro-tree today, but not like the Frisians. The Frisians were very serious pro-tree people because in many cases they actually saw the trees as divine. Now Winfrith, like probably many fired up missionaries, and I'm sure this was going on in the 19th century and perhaps even into the 20th, comes into this Frisian territory, what we call Belgium, the Netherlands, and all up there. It says, you think those trees are pretty big, don't you? Let me show you. Taking out his hatchet. Doesn't look so big to me. Well, that's not tactful. That's not tactful at all. And remember, he is doing this in a very spiritual way. I mean, he's saying, you know, there's a different way. This is just a little demonstration. No offense. But you need to see the tree is just no big deal. And I'm impressed to be 80, A, to look like that, and B, to be able to take down a tree. But that's just my opinion. In any event, you see all the tree people around him. You think it was Arbor Day. What are they doing? They're all there. They go tree, go tree. And yeah, and that's going to be the end of our Boniface. You say, well, that's the end of him. No, it isn't. We've only begun the tale of Boniface and his significance to our period. But you must have your break. I want you to take it. Enjoy every moment of it. Well, at the ripe old age of 80, Boniface will be a great martyr to the church. But as I say, I thought I would go on and bring that out before I told you more of him, because there was quite a background. And much of it had to do with, shall I just say, Hammer for short, Charles Martel. And yes, as the media would have emphasized, he was the hero of the Battle of Tours. And that's how we come full circle, right? That we started talking about Merovingians and mayors of the palace. And mayor of the palace, which sounds very impressive, means you're sort of the administrator and leader of the military and all that, great. But he actually defeated an army, which some have said they were merely drifters who had come up from the Umayyad base in Spain. But however you want to consider that, it was in the Western Christian world a big deal, that Battle of Tours. Now, I used to read books, said, oh, well, that's the reason that we're not all Muslims is because they won. I doubt it. But anyway, it definitely made the headlines. And, you know, Papal Weekly or something like that, everybody was going like, wow, that Martel's a great guy. Well, he was, but he was mayor of the palace. And you think after he got home, beaten up on Umayyads and see all those folks, yeah, and he's saying, yeah, that was great. I'm feeling good. People sure do love me. But just mayor? Can I be anything besides that? Aren't there new opportunities? Just feel like if I had more, if it weren't for that le roi fainéant, the chiller, what's he done? He doesn't kill Muslims. I do, and I'm good at it. So that's where we are with him. Now, how does Boniface get mixed up with him? Well, as is so often the case if you study modern 19th and 20th century imperialism, don't you think those missionaries in Africa and Asia would sometimes call on the rulers in Britain, France, United States, are y'all gonna let this happen to us? You know, they were messing with us and we were just spreading the word of the faith, and don't you think you all ought to send in some troops? and show. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, I think the Benedictines were anticipating some help from the hero of Christendom, and that would be Charles Martel. It's an interesting way that these things happen, because remember, if you want to think about modern day geography, think about where Tours is in relationship to the Netherlands. I don't think it would have been that great a journey for them to have reached out to each other. And I'm sure that he knew about Boniface's mission. Now, as they became involved, and I'm not saying that Martel was willing to put in a major Frankish army to protect the activities of the Benedictines with the Frisians, but I am willing to say that he was supportive. The Frankish church, that is to say, the Catholic leaders in France, were not as idealistic and pure as we might like to think they were. Some of you will remember Gregory of Tours. God, Tours coming up a lot. Gregory of Tours, who wrote about the conversion of Clovis to Catholicism, the great historian. Well, I'm sure he came from one of the best families in the area of Tours. And you're thinking, you mean there was, I'm going to use a bad word, nepotism? Don't be shocked. We have to move on from knowing about this kind of corruption and evil. You mean there might have been simoniacs? People who were buying office? Yeah. These kinds of evils, and maybe some closet pagans, I don't know. I'm afraid that even clerical chastity might have been under attack. You're not saying married bishops. Well, let's just say special relationships. So we can have all kind of euphemisms, just whatever makes us comfortable. Anyway, St. Boniface, as he will become, Winfrid, has his work cut out for him. And I consider that to be a kind of, what shall we call it? Taking him away from his main task. Because he was at his heart a missionary and a tree chopper. He really did want to straighten out these people, and he did to a very great extent. I mean, the Dutch are lovely. I don't give all the Dutch accomplishments. I don't give all the credit to him, but he was a good starter. In any event, he did have great encouragement from the papacy, and he was awarded the bishopric or archbishopric of Mainz, okay, in Western Germany, the western part of Germany. And what that indicates is that this English Benedictine is now a sort of, I guess in today's terms, international. He'd been to Rome, he'd met with the popes, he was an English Benedictine monk, and he had all of these connections. And his connections with Frankish rulers, and let's just call him what he is. I know he's mayor of the palace, but he's de facto ruler, okay? It's bad to be number two. But still, he'd saved Christendom. And so Charles Martel's a big figure. And for a man like St. Boniface, very important connection. So, he is going to play a major role here. And a major role because after Charles Martel's death, he will be succeeded by his son, who's known to history as Pepin the Short. God, that's bad, isn't it? You know, probably in today's world, we would think he really was short, because even tall people would be about like me, and you say, well, that's pitiful. It is. But that way, it's just a whole different idea of height, isn't it? And Pepin the Short must have been really small. But he was the son of Martel, who was the son of a Pepin. And they were all mayors. And what are those Merovingians doing? Chilling. They just saying, are you busy today? No, I'm just sort of checking everything out, and everything's looking good. You're saying, how do you justify your existence? You know, these Merovingians. But in fact, we do know that regardless of that, it is still true that Pepin is not yet prepared to be more assertive, I guess we'd say. We need a little push. And that, of course, again, will come about thanks to Boniface. How much of this has to do with Boniface himself? Or is Boniface just the messenger? You know, it'd be fascinating to know if, you know, maybe we could get to the next world, we can ask him and see, what were you thinking? And he was like, gosh, no one has ever asked me that. I've been waiting all these centuries to tell. You know, I would be so excited because I really have questions knowing. I mean, I know he's an important agent. I know he thought he was doing it for best. He's a saint after all. But what his motives were, what his exact role was, I don't think we do know. But we know that when Boniface, now Archbishop of Mainz, went to Rome, he asked the Pope, who was a Gregory, took a nice name, as you can imagine. Nobody can be Gregory first, but he could be Gregory second or third. And Boniface asked him, is it right that he who reigns does not rule, and he who rules does not reign? You go, I wonder what we're getting at. Oh, we know exactly. And the Pope says, well, my son, that's a very fraught question. Question loaded with many, many implications. And the Pope's thinking to himself, you know, sometimes it gets lonely. These Lombards nibbling at me. Those Greeks, useless. They're always trying to lord it over me. I mean, if you're Pope, you have troubles. It's hurtful. Maybe that little Frank would be good for me. Talking about Pepin the Short. Not St. Boniface. He's just the messenger. He says, you tell him I said it is not right. Bingo. Yeah. Say, I guess we need to make some changes then. Soon, a pope with the interesting name of Zacharias, or Zachary, kind of like Taylor, yeah. And he's the only one. So pull that on your friends at the next party. You can say, which Zachary do you think it was? And you say, there was only one. they'll be impressed with your papal knowledge. The Zachary, there's only one. Kind of like King John of England. Nobody would take that name again, right? So Pope Zachary will say, in essence, it is not right, and you are authorized to anoint him. Now, make sure that he has the approval of the Frankish nobles, which I think would be like a pep rally. You know, do y'all want me to be king? Yeah, you're great. Are you sure? I can't hear you, you know, that kind of thing. So I'm thinking that that is not going to be a point of order. Can we have a counting of heads at the meeting? Could you imagine those big Franks saying, we need to count them up? No. I think they all were excited, and that means, of course, that our Merovingian has got to go. It's sad, and yet not so sad. You're a loser. We know it, you know it. You say, and what about my golden parachute? I know, you're getting no golden parachute. How rude, isn't it? You would think that's the least they could leave me with. But in fact, we know that his end will be not very pleasant. Yes, a new coif for Kilderic III. And you see, he was just a teenager, but already lazy. I said, well, they will change that. You won't be lazy where you're going to be, buddy, because you're going to be a little monk, a little bald monk. Now you say, why does he need a hairdo? Well, because the theory was the Merovingians got divine blessing through their hair. So, no hair, no divine blessing, okay? And you look at those monks, you could just see them working. Yeah, you're going to be a new inmate. What do you think about that? Yeah, man, it's like, can I still will you call me your majesty? Or some, you know? So, that 19th century rendition of the last days of Kilderic must have been very depressing. I meant last days as a layman. I didn't mean they were going, there's no foul play. I just meant to say, you know, Granddad would be so disappointed, you know, to know that I ended up this way. Now, what are y'all going to be doing? Are we going to be praying a lot? And I'm going to take some Greek classes. I got a lot of activities, right? Maybe some icon painting. I don't know. Got a full plate. No more do nothing. No chilling in the monastery, I can tell you that. Now, I'll say this for St. Benedict. St. Benedict believed in a balanced life, but he believed in 8 hours of sleep a night, which I think is good. He believed 3 square meals. He didn't want his monks to be hungry or tired or anything like that. So Kilderic wasn't going to be abused, but it's still not like being a king. And bald. So that's takes care of the throne. And let's face it, if we do anything, we read the Bible. And where do we go? We go to 1 Samuel. And we find out about what happened to King Saul. Yep, because we know King Saul didn't make it. He lost out. Maybe he had tried and just did not get a satisfactory evaluation from the Lord. So that was the end of Saul's career. And we remember that Samuel then anointed David. And nobody would ever think that the popes and St. Boniface were not very, very well aware of that biblical passage. I spoke to you earlier about biblical allegory. And if you were ever in doubt, be in no doubt now, because there it is, the anointing of Pepin. You are going to be king. Now this is Boniface to Pepin, because Kilderic was found wanting, as they would say in the King James Bible. And so God has chosen you to be the king. And you know what Pepin will say? Oh, shucks, I really appreciate this. I just want to help. I just want to, and all of that mystical geniality. So I'm sure, just give me a big hug. So that you can sense this is a wonderful deal that is being made. And you're saying, I'm just really worried, though, about popes making kings and kings coming and kings going and poor Kilderic and his new coif. All of these are questions we have to worry about. Don't worry, just understand that from the perspective of the papacy, this is going to be a very wise move. And now, if I may, I'll refer to King Pepin. And you think lots of nouveaux would be sort of embarrassed and, oh, well, I'm not really king. I'm just a big leader. No. He was okay with it. I'm the new king. And, of course, the bishops will be among his greatest supporters. None of them are going to say, gosh, we miss our Merovingian. He was such a nice kid. And no, you got to move on. You got to keep pace with the trend of events. And that's what I'm saying. It seemed to me that at this stage, Boniface has made this connection. Boniface does the work, by the way. He actually anoints Pepin with his own hands and his own holy oil. So this is the real McCoy. So we have a new king of the Franks who is ready to take on the enemies of Christendom, and the Pope will, as we used to say in childhood, become sort of like Pepin's pen pal. They'll have little correspondence, and how are you? I'm fine. How are things in Rome? Things are great up here in Gaul. We've been really busy fighting Arians. And, whatever activities you're doing. All of this, then, is to say that Pepin feels he has, what do we call it? IOU. IOUs. The Pope did something very nice for me. He made it possible for me to be king. I am kind of like David. David, Pepin. David part 2. That kind. So, I owe a lot to the Pope. But, the Lombards, now part of our Catholic team, I told you that. They're ex-Arians, but they've joined the squad. But they're still sort of getting mighty close to the Pope. And the Pope, in many ways, is going to finally say, Pepin, I know you appreciate me. I know I appreciate you. I love you a lot. You're like my son, if I were not practicing chastity. So that means that I know that if I were having troubles, hint, hint, you would come help. He said, yes, sir, Your Holiness. So the long and the short of the matter is that Pepin will lead what I suppose would be a very fired up Frankish force. I guess these were troops like those that his father, Charles Martel, had called upon. who are imbued with the faith, and we'll go down there and beat up some Lombards. And you say, but they're not Arians. Yeah, but they were. And they really have annoyed the Pope. So what happens? Well, after Pepin's victory, the lands, or many of the lands, will be taken, and look at this map to come. It's going to change everything, because the lands that had been Byzantine, now occupied by Lombards, will be taken by Pepin, and there will be a very melodramatic ceremony, we are told, a ceremony through which Pepin will go to the tomb of St. Peter. Now, don't ask me where that is, because I don't think we know now. But they knew then. And it was said that he went there and presented the deed to those lands. These lands included Ravenna and all of that eastern Italian area going up to Rome. And you go, I thought those lands were occupied by the Byzantines. Well, Greeks, they didn't deserve them. His Holiness deserves them. He's the great one in this. Oh, don't you think Pepin didn't get a sharp note from Constantinople? Probably in Greek. Fool ya. Yeah. Boy, going to have a translator here. But it's going to be a letter, and it's probably some harsh language. You know, like, you're it. I'm going to use a bad word. Usurper. You usurped these lands, which are Byzantine. And he says, well, you're just a big old Greek loser. So I mean, you're thinking people are getting really ugly about all this, but then we know who's the big winner here, Peter, the Pope. Now, let me say, this doesn't mean the end of the Lombards. That joy will come about under Pepin's son. But it does mean that the Lombards are no longer a major figure. And I suspect there will be a special Frankish guard of honor to protect the Pope if, he wants to step out and says, what are you looking at, mister? That kind of thing. Just sort of be menacing. And there's going to be like this, I guess you'd call it, special relationship from now on between the papacy and the Frankish kings, a relationship that will last a very, very long time indeed. Because I think the Frankish leadership have reasons to be very appreciative. And how long are we talking? Are we talking about a year or two? I think not. Let's go all the way, shall we, to the 18th and 19th centuries. Yes. I know many of you probably wonder about Italian unification. If you don't, maybe you should. And when you do, remind yourself of the Papal States. You heard about it here. You see the Papal States there that go all the way from Ravenna, all the way down to the land in brown? Well, let me take you to the days of James Buchanan, Millard Fillmore, if you want a little American connection. At that particular time, the late 50s, 1860, as some of you know, the Italians started getting kind of sassy. and wanted to form their own nation. And you see the land that is brown, or rather, that was what was left of the Papal States. Now look north of that, and that land will be taken away from the papacy by the new Italian government. You say, well, how rude. Isn't the new Italian government Catholic? Sort of. They are excommunicated Catholics. Oh, yeah. The King of Italy got a letter in the mail. Dear King, damn you. You know? I mean, it's not going to be pleasant. And you see all that area around Rome? 1860 to 1870. And in 1870, the Italian army marches in. But think how long that was that Rome, that is the papacy, maintained authority over those lands on the basis of having gotten it by the grace of Pepin, king of the Franks, and taken it with security from that enemy, the Lombard people. Well, so this will be a very, very important episode then in papal history, in French history, in Italian history, but all culminating in the final product, so to say, in the reign of Pepin's son, who was, of course, so eminent that great is even part of his name, isn't it? Charlemagne. And there we'll start next time. Thank you very much. Thank you.